Stippling your firearm right now on Pirate Firearms and Reloading. Hey folks, so today we're going to talk about stippling. So stippling is the technique where you use some form of hot device to melt polymer and give it a grip texture. So what I've got here is a very cheap off Amazon kind of soldering iron, kind of wood burner. It is temperature controlled, which I like because you'll see that you get very different effects based on the temperature you're using. Now, as somebody who has a background in electronics, I'm never going to use my good soldering iron for this, so that's why I picked up the cheap wood burner. So to give you an indication of what we're doing today, I have the wood burner set here at between about 250 and 275 degrees Celsius. And that seems to be working really well for this polymer stock I've got in front of me. This happens to actually be the stock of my Citadel Levtac. So if you've seen that series, this stock may look a little familiar. Why am I doing it is the first question I'm going to get asked. So as you can see, as the stock comes straight out of the box, there's not a lot of grip texture here. And I'd really like to improve that and get a good solid grip, particularly if you've got gloves on, or you've got wet hands, or it's a hot day and you're sweating. I just want a little bit more purchase on this area here. It already has a really nice borderline, which is something that becomes very, very important when you're stippling too. And I'll go through that here in a second. Practice makes perfect, right? So I've just got one of these cheap plastic ammo cans here, and I've gone through and done an experiment with the different patterns. So this particular iron, which I'll show you in a second, came with a whole lot of different heads on it, and it allowed me to trial and produce several different patterns and then decide ultimately which one I liked. So the one I settled on the end was this one here. It's sort of, some people just describe it as a tic-tac pattern. The second one that I thought came out very well here was just the dots. And I'll show you the two different tips that were used to produce these different results. Now over here on the little arrows, if you like, is where I've experimented with temperature. What I found when I got the iron too hot and I was doing it very, very quickly is the pattern started to look rough and all over the place. When I dropped the temperature down and sort of took my time a bit more and held it in place for a bit longer, the pattern really started to improve. Now, when you pick a test patch, you want to pick a polymer that is very similar to the project you're going to be working on. Now, this is definitely more of a softer, flexible, and oily pattern. So I believe this is probably more like ABS or something. Whereas I'm not quite sure what the stock is, but it does actually react slightly differently. So this is where it pays to also do a little test patch where you can't see it on the actual project, but this will give you a really good foundation as to where to start. This little kit came with a whole set of different tips, so I'll show you some of them that I've tried and had success with and not had success with. So the simple dots was done with this rounded brass tip here. That does give a good result. The ones that almost look like scales was done with this sort of bevel cut round pin, which gives you sort of an oval shape when it's used. And then there was definitely some more fancier patterns too, almost like a four-leaf clover. And then there was this sort of star pattern as well. As you'll see on the box, some of these patterns really look great when you look at the tip. When they actually come out in real life, they don't turn out as well. That's your star pattern there. I mean, it works, but it's not great. So that's your angular cut round pin that gives you, like I said, almost scales. And I had several different sizes of those, so I tried those. I also had some circles with a hollowed out center, which kind of gives you almost like a chainmail pattern. That was quite good as well, but it doesn't offer a lot of texture. One of the critical things when you stipple is doing borders. So I'm lucky that this project already has a really good border in place. Around the edges here, the border is very good. If I didn't have this border here, I'd certainly be doing a rough border in the first place. Now you can either do that with a marker pen or some form of straight edge and actually running the iron across. What I found for doing borders is actually this sort of almost knife edge type head. And this cuts a very nice border and it allows you to just gently drag it across the work surface and give you a good border. And once again, I experimented with all the different heads to do that. So this one here, this borderline here that sort of runs around there, was done with that knife type pattern. These other ones I actually did with checkering tools for wood stocks, and they didn't really work out. And I sort of tried to go over them with the hot iron, but they didn't make a good result. So bordering is important. You want a border to follow when you start, and then you want to go back over the border when you're done. So for that, I'm just going to use this small needle file. It's, get it to focus. It's curved on both sides. So picture a half round file, but it's actually rounded on both sides. And it comes down to a point which will allow me to get it down into the border and really cut that border out. What you essentially want to do, I like to start by edging along the border first, and then working my way down over the pattern of the stock. Now the other thing you'll notice is I've got a block of wood here. What happens sometimes is you will get extra plastic on the iron and it will tend to make your pattern look a little funny. So what I'm doing is just wiping the excess plastic off on the block of wood. So I'll try and give you the best angle possible, but you really want to stabilize yourself and just push it in like that. What I'm doing, every time I do this, I'm actually changing up the angle in which I'm making the line. Hence the sort of Tic Tacs. If you've seen the clear packets of Tic Tacs, which they've come in for years and years, they sort of all lay at funny angles and give you this really interesting pattern. And this is essentially all I'm doing here. Just working my way around. You get the picture, just keep changing the angle. Never do two burns with the same angle unless you truly have to work your way out of a hole. And that's something else I'd like to point out. So don't go all the way around all the edges and then try and work towards the center. It becomes rather difficult. If you start and do your main important border, and you come down to the part where basically the stock meets the lower tang of the receiver, you can sort of just work your way down the pattern and it makes a really good job. With the magic of YouTube, I've already done the other side for you. So as long as this stays focused, as you can see, I've done that entire piece working down from the top down to where the bottom tang would insert, and then this pattern happens to wrap around the underside of the stock and I've started up onto the other side, which you've just seen me do. So I'm going to carry on this pattern and not bore you to death, and then we'll throw up a couple of photos of the end result.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. And if you found this video helpful, please share it with your friends. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments below. Catch you next time.